Hi, I'm Sergei Dratchev. I'm a freight broker and heavy equipment operator from Canada. And today I wanted to talk about some tips how to import construction equipment from Canada to US. I did a similar video when I was talking about how to move equipment from US to Canada. So now we're doing the opposite thing. And the Canadian dollar quite often is much weaker than the US dollar, which makes the used equipment market in Canada very attractive to American buyers, right? Because your $100 here become like 130, 135. So it's cheaper, but it's a different country, right? So there's a border. So you have to deal with Canadian carriers most of the time, and the border crossing procedure. But some tips I was thinking about. First off, how do you find a carrier or a trucking company? Of course, you can work with an American company, or you can work with a Canadian local company somewhere close to where your piece of equipment is sitting. And based on my experience, both as a trucker and a freight broker, I would say that if you're bringing something from Canada to US, it would always be cheaper to use a Canadian carrier. US guys will most of the time probably will have to deadhead into Canada, and this is like, you know, the rates will be, there's no comparison between the rates you'll get from a US carrier and a Canadian carrier. Now there's a bunch of directories. You can use Google, or you can use a freight broker like me. I have access to lots of trucking companies both in the States and Canada, so I can get quotes pretty quickly, and I can pre-screen them, so make sure they have enough experience and it's a legitimate trucking company, not a scam, and that they have enough insurance and they have actually their own trucks. Because some of these trucking companies, what they do is they don't actually have their own trucks. They will give you a quote, and then they will rebroker it, give it to another carrier, and just it can lead to some very bad consequences. You can lose your load, they can damage your load, or they can just hijack it and keep it and demand more money. So there's crooks both on the trucking side and freight broker side. So you want to make sure that you're dealing with a proper trucking company, and that's part of the job of a freight broker like me. Is I pre-screen them, right? I make sure that it's a good company that can be trusted, or maybe it's a company I worked with before. And so that's step number one, is finding a freight broker or finding a trucking company. And then of course you want to decide, and so American or Canadian, so Canadian is cheaper. And then depending on where your piece of equipment is located, and you see a big map of Canada behind me, it's a big country, right? So this is US over here. So it will affect the rate, that how much it will cost to move your piece of equipment. It'll affect the rate depending on where the most miles or kilometers will be covered. Like, let's say you have a load in somewhere here in Vancouver, BC, and you're located somewhere here in near, where is it? Sorry, let's say Buffalo, New York, right? So you can either go through Canada, which add miles, but it can be cheaper, or you can cross here into Washington and go through US. And again, based on my experience, and I have a way of checking how much permits will cost. I have a membership with a site where I can get approximate cost of permits. And we're talking about construction equipment, so most of the time it's oversized, it's overweight. And again, based on my experience as a trucker and a broker, it's usually cheaper to go through Canada. If it's a long trip, permits will be cheaper. If it's a long vehicle like a truck and trailer, in the States, some states might require a pilot car or escort, which of course costs more money. So again, it's more, if you can route the load more through Canada than US, it'll be cheaper. And then the paperwork, so you need a customs broker, because trucking companies, they do some customs work, but they don't do the entire thing. Usually it's like the carrier has to use, you know, PAPS or ACE online, right? So they do their part, but then you still need a customs broker who does it from their end. And then when online, they have two records matching through that PAPS number, a unique kind of like identifier of this load. That's when, you know, the carrier has a green light and they can cross the border. And of course, border crossing, it's totally unpredictable, and it can take 10 minutes, it can take 2 days. Sometimes they have issues with their software, with their computers, you know, or the border can be closed due to some, you know, bad activity, like it happened recently at the Rainbow Bridge, you know, where a vehicle exploded, hit a customs officer booth. So, and you have to be prepared if the carrier is delayed at the border through no fault of their own. There might be some detention charges, right? They might ask for money, especially when somebody screwed up and the paperwork that's needed by CBP was not properly prepared. You know, they can ask anywhere from $200 to $1,000 a day if they're delayed. And I remember a couple of times when I was a trucker, something happened Friday. I showed up at the border Friday night and couldn't cross. The information was not filed properly, so they turned me around. So I had to sit in the States until Monday, because that particular customs broker was closed on the weekend. And so another tip, it's always a good idea to show up at the border, let the carrier show up at the border during business hours, you know. Don't let them cross like at 7 or 8 p.m. Because yeah, the border is open, but then if there's any issues, most customs brokers don't work 24/7. Like the biggest ones do, but most of them, they work like regular hours. And so if you need some assistance, you'll have to wait until the next day, and then the carrier might say, hey, I need some money because now I'm wasting 1 day over here. So so yeah, there can be some issues with customs at the border. It's once again, it's super important to have proper documentation, to have all the ducks in a row. And sometimes they will require original documents, you know, like original bill of sale, original bill of lading, not copies sent by email. Information can be found on Customs and Border Protection website, cbp.gov. This is the main page, and the most interesting, of course, here at the top, you see travel trade. So trade means that's commercial, import, export. That's basically what we're talking about today. When you bought a piece of equipment or vehicle in Canada and try to bring it to US, that tag will give you more information. But here I wanted to point out this little locate port information, because of course, you know, it will affect the price of the truck, depending where you want to cross. So let's say you know, of course Canada is over here, right? So you'll be using one of these states, you know, depending where your new piece of equipment is sitting. So I was based in Ontario when I was a trucker, right? So most of the time we were crossing either through New York or Pennsylvania or Michigan. But if the load is somewhere in the Western Canada, then you might use one of these, right? Like Montana, North Dakota, stuff like that. But basically what's cool is that once you click here, let's say New York, it gives you the ports, port of entry, like for example Buffalo, New York, with its code 0901, and you have the address, you have the hours of operation, but they're just office. Actually port is open 24/7. Yeah, over here, hours of operation 7 to 12. Oh, so they closed during the night. Okay. And but also another interesting thing here is the list of brokers. because of course these are two separate countries. Sometimes our American friends forget that. So it's not just moving a piece of equipment from, let's say, Ontario to New York. It's not the same as moving it from Ohio to New York. There's much more paperwork involved, but here, based on the port, you see all these, there's like thousands of brokers. Like I recognize these biggest ones, for example, this Derringer, Cole, then there's, of course, there's Livingston, you know, stuff like that. But once you, maybe you already have an account with them, because you'll have to, yeah, FedEx is a big one. So once you click on this, what do you see here? You see the phone number and the address, that's it. And then you call them and you just, you know, they tell you what kind of paperwork you need. Then you open an account. Usually they will ask for deposit or prepayment. And so because, yeah, carriers and brokers don't do customs clearance. Like truckers do it on their side, but the main clearance is done by a broker. So you have to find a customs broker. But I want to show you here this trade. So you have a lot of information here, like this one, basic import and export. And then here you have importing, and you even have a video, so you can watch a video on the import process, importing in the United States. There's like a PDF here, 200 pages. Look, 211 pages. If you need some bedtime reading, you can go through this.